On March 3rd and 4th of this year, the Bahamas hosted the 9th International Labor Organization's meeting of Caribbean labor ministers. And that's what we're going to talk about on the Reid Factor today, the outcome of that meeting and what we need to do as we advance on the labor front. Our special guest is the Director of Labor, Reid Factor. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Great. Well, it was a successful meeting, I'm hearing, from all of the parties involved. That some very interesting things came out of that ILO meeting. What was your experience of it first?
Well, first and foremost, the government of the Bahamas was extremely pleased to host the 9th meeting of the International Labor Organization Ministers of Labor for Caribbean region. Very successful meeting. The meeting focused on a number of very important and pertinent issues affecting the world of work. And it also was a precursor for the International Labor Conference that is expected to be held in Geneva in June of this year. It focused on a number of important issues, and we are of the opinion, based on the feedback, from the organizers of the meeting, the ILO sub-regional office, and indeed the Director General. It was a very productive and very successful meeting.
Great. You speak about the Director General, and I was very fortunate to have an interview with him, a fairly lengthy interview with him, but we've got some snippets of it. Now, this happened before the meeting occurred. Guy Ryder is the Director General of the International Labor Organization. And in this first clip, he's talking about the state of labor around the world.
The global economy is growing much more slowly than its previous trend. Some people talk about secular stagnation. That is to say, in the long term, we've got to get used to it, that we're not going to grow so quickly as we used to do. And that has as an almost inevitable consequence the reality that we're not creating enough jobs, or as many jobs as we used to. Consider this, 40 million young people come onto the labour market every year around the world. 40 million. Now, some other people leave the labour market because they retire. But 40 million jobs is a very big order, and we're not growing quickly enough to generate those jobs. So that's the first problem. The second problem is that, there's a real paradox, and I think people scratch their heads about this around the world. Very often employers tell us, we can't find the people we need. We can't find the right skills. We can't find the people who can fill the vacancies that we have. And yet there are long queues of the unemployed. It's a weird thing, isn't it? There's what we call the mismatch between the supply of young people and their skills, and those skills which are demanded by the labour market. And this is something I know in Bahamas people are looking at this. This is also something we've got to get to grips with.
Yep, he's talking from a global perspective, but that rings very true to you too as well.
It hits home right here in our country. Listen, it's a reality. We have so many employers today are seeking young people to work in their establishments, but the young people just don't have the skills. And I'm not only talking about the soft skills, but just the hard skills. That is why the government of the Bahamas has established a few years ago the National Training Agency.
Right.
Hopefully, with the emergence of the University of the Bahamas, that will assist us a lot. The NTA is designed to identify young people between the ages of 18 and 29, to put them in classrooms and teach them the soft skills. Then to have those students, after they have learned some of the basic soft skills, to go into the workplace on an internship basis. And hopefully that will prepare them to meet the labor market. We are pleased that the NTA is doing a tremendous job, and the idea is when people leave from the NTA program, they can enter probably the University of the Bahamas or one of the other tertiary level institutions. Because in order to function in the labor market today in the world of work, you have to have the proper skills. If we don't have the skills resident with our Bahamians, then the employers will be seeking non-Bahamians to come to the country and take these jobs, and that's what we do not want.
Right. Yeah. Well, we actually have a soundbite because we also interviewed the labor minister, our labor minister, the Honorable D. Shane Gibson, and he was speaking about the success of the NTA as well. And we're going to play that in a bit. But before we get to that, the whole discussion about youth employment was major at this meeting.
Very important, very important. When we look at the Caribbean regions, I think we estimate there are about 6 million unemployed people in the region. And a vast majority of that is young people. The ILO considers young people between the ages of 18 and 27. In the Bahamas, there has no different. The unemployment rate is about 15% now, but amongst the young people, it's close to 30%. What does that mean? So many young people are sitting down with nothing to do. When they're unable to find work, then obviously they find time to do other things, and more than likely it leads to criminality. Therefore, we have our level of crime increasing in the Bahamas. And the government of the Bahamas has given me, as the Director of Labor, a mandate to transform the Bahamas Employment Exchange to make it more accessible to the Bahamian public, particularly in the high populated areas. So in the very near future, we're going to open up a sub-office on Pointed Road in Fox Hill, in Carmichael Road in Fox Hill. We're going to transform the offices where we want to invite young people to come in. If you don't have a resume, we'll teach you how to do a resume. If you don't know how to fill out a job application, we teach you how to we teach you how to be interviewed. If you don't have the skills, we're going to direct you either to the BTVI or to the National Training Agency. We're going to focus a lot on young people, getting these young people employed and get them in productive jobs.
Let me ask you this: so can the those two institutions you named, BTVI and the NTA, there are only so many people they can handle at a time.
It is insufficient.
And how many people do we have coming out of school, high school on average?
By June of this year, that's an additional 3,000, I think, persons coming to high school. Some of them hopefully will be skilled.
And when you say skilled, we're talking about the basics.
Yeah, I'm saying the basic
X
skills.
amount of basic writing and reading and arithmetic.
We had an employee in Grand Bahama. We had a meeting in Grand Bahama last year. An employer said he wants to hire young people, but he gave young people a basic examination when they come in, and some of them don't have the ability to simple write and add up. I mean, it may seem simple, but if you are a cashier in a business and you know how to add, that creates a problem for somebody who's an employer.
You can't last on a job.
You can't last on a job. So what do? We have to look at our education system. I think the Ministry of Education is doing something and trying to impact that. We have to look at what happens after education. We have to find a way for those young men, those young women who fall through the cracks. What do we have? And everybody has to go along the academic route. Why can't we think about special schools for plumbers and electricians? Hey, welders, we have a shortage of welders in this country.
Wow.
And welders pay good money in Grand Bahama. They pay $30 an hour to be a welder. But we have to ask for non-Bahamians to come in because those who are skilled have a job.
Now, if you wanted, because I'm sure some young people might hear about this, if you want to be a welder, you can go to a place like BTVI.
Exactly.
But what other places offer you the opportunity to learn how to be a
proficient welder? Only BTVI, and there's an institution in Grand Bahama. And also we have some employees, for instance, in Grand Bahama Shipyard. If you have the basic welding skills from a BTVI, they will take you. They bring in international experts and train you to be expert welders. So opportunities are there. We just have to encourage our young men and our young women to take advantage of these opportunities.
Now, you referred to what the Education Ministry is doing, and I believe the Prime Minister referred to that the other day. And also, it involves separating those who may not be as quick learners as others, right? But he also pointed to the fact that this is another way that we have to, deal with crime. Yeah. And I spoke to one of the delegates there, the head of the Caribbean Diplomatic Academy, Professor Andy Wright.
Yes, Mr. Wright.
And he's saying, it's just so critical that you got to do stuff with young people, particularly where the CDA is based, which is in Trinidad, because they've got this whole issue of extremism happening for idle hands there. And it's not as bad here as what some of them are doing, but you can't take it for granted. Let's hear that soundbite from Professor Andy Wright.
I'm very concerned about extremism in particular. It hasn't hit the Caribbean as hard as it has Canada, the United States, and Britain, and France, and so on. But there's an element there where young people...
And if I can interrupt you, so when our viewers get it, you're talking about, I'm assuming, including things like young people who finding themselves attracted to things like ISIS, etc.
Precisely, because, if you don't feel a sense of belonging in your own community, and ISIS gives you that sense of belonging, and which you can actually get from your computer, online. There might be a temptation by young people who find themselves not being able to get jobs to actually go off and do something very exciting in Syria or in Iraq, working and fighting on behalf of ISIS for some goal that they think it might be a very laudable goal. So we have to be able to try to get those people before ISIS gets to them. And I think that's very important for this region as well, because as you know, I don't know what the situation is in the Bahamas, but in Trinidad and Tobago, we've got people fighting for ISIS.
And that's a frightening issue that I think a lot of Bahamians don't think about the possible reality of that But it is indeed a possibility, huh? If it's already happening in our
It is
region
a
and on
possi-
our doorstep in
On
the
our
US.
doorstep, and let's not forget now, the emergence of the telecommunications sector has young people today have access to the internet. That's how ISIS begins to recruit. We are probably the closest off-island nation to the United States. We're on the doorstep of the Florida case. It is so easy for young people to be influenced on the internet because they don't have a job, because they don't feel any self-worth, any self-esteem. They can be easy targets for these Islamic extremists to do certain things. The good relationship we have with the Bahamas. Most Bahamians can travel to the United States on a police record. Can you imagine what would happen to our country and our nation if a couple of Bahamians are attracted to go to Syria, like the two young girls from the United Kingdom the other day? They're in Syria now. You don't know when they come back. They have passports. Imagine what impact that would have on our entire country. So we have a mandate. We have to be committed to finding jobs for our young people today.
That's true, and we're already overly concerned. Well, not overly, because you can't be too concerned about it, but extremely concerned about guns importations, things like that. We're going to talk a little bit more about these things, and of course, we're going to get a soundbite a little later on from the minister speaking about what has happened with people who've gone through the National Training Agency. I'm speaking with the Director of Labor, Mr. Reid Factor, on the Reid Factor. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Reid Factor. Our special guest is the Director of Labor, Reid Factor, and we're talking about the recent ILO Caribbean Labor Ministers meeting that was held here in the Bahamas, and how the Bahamas is advancing locally and adhering to international standards as well. Of course, the conference was held under the theme Decent Work and Sustainable Development, and the whole concept about decent work should be fairly simple for people, but I think we should still explain to them what the decent work agenda is all about.
What decent work is a concept adopted by the ILO, where every citizen of the country should be afforded an opportunity to work in decent work, an opportunity to have a collective bargaining, a union to bargain on their behalf, to have rights to pension and social services, to have a decent wage, to have the ability, if they are made redundant, that redundancy pays are reasonable and above standard, that their work should be able to sustain their standard of living and quality of life for them and their families. That's the concept of decent work. Decent work has been adopted by every country in the international ILO. Some have not enshrined the decent work concept into laws. Wonderfully, the Bahamas was the first country in the Caribbean in 2009 to adopt a decent work country program, and the decent work country program is the basis on which the National Tripartite Council has been developed, and so we're extremely proud.
So although we sometimes hear a lot of gripe from laborers, from workers, employees, we are actually really doing what we should be doing,
yes, sir.
And a little bit ahead of the curve. But we were talking about young people and being unemployed. But one of the things that also came up was a child labor initiative, right? And I think they were talking about kids underage working. I mean, I've not heard of that as being a problem in this country. Is it?
We have some child labor. See, child labor is a child should be able to concentrate on his education up until he reaches high school and graduates from high school. We have in this country, sad to say, some parents have children forced to work in food stores.
Right, like packing boys.
In restaurants, in family businesses. There are some laws under the Employment Act that restricts work for child. You can have children work, but there are some guidelines when a child is allowed to work and how old this child is allowed to work. And in many instances, those guidelines are not followed. A couple of years ago, the Ministry of Labor in conjunction with the trade union movement did some surveys, and we went into the food stores, and we was trying to restrict children from being at the food stores 9, 10 o'clock at night. They're supposed to be home studying, finishing their assignments, their homework. You know where we got the most pushback from? The parents.
Wow.
The parents was the pushback. No, my child got to be there. They need to find something for their child to be. That child need to make a couple of dollars to help them pay rent, and that's not good. That's probably why our grades are so low now. Children are supposed to be afforded an opportunity to strive and learn.
That's true. And what's the youngest age you can employ someone at?
14. No child should be working under the age of 14 in the Bahamas. I'm sad to say, hey, there is. And the Department of Labor, the Ministry of Labor, Ministry of Social Services are actively seeking out these employers. Now, there are some exceptions to the rule. If you're in a family business, you have a family restaurant, you have a farm, children are allowed to work on certain hours and on the weekends. But for the most part, the government, the laws restrict children from working, and if they do have to work, there are some specific areas where they work and specific times when they have to work.
But we were talking in the last segment too about the national training agency that's designed to help younger people who need some help to, really do well on a job and find a job. And the Minister of Labor, the Honorable D. Shane Gibson, he spoke to the successes of the NTA. Let's hear what he had to say.
Several of the larger developments who are working along with us, who have agreed to take on some of these persons. And so I think we have had a pretty successful rate. I don't know the exact number. It may be around 30 or so percent, or 30 or plus percent of the persons who actually graduate, who we've been able to assist in getting jobs. And of course, other persons were able to get jobs as a result of the training that they would have had. And so, and also the good thing about this is all of our programs are certified and recognized by sitting guilds. Right? So you not only get a diploma or certificate from the National Training Agency, you get a certificate from the actual city and guilds itself. And they come over and they monitor the program to make sure the program remains at a standard that's acceptable to them.
Good.
City and Guilds is an exciting program. We have, New Providence has been up and running for some time. Grand Bahama is now up and running. We now have offices in Exuma and in Eleuthera. Pretty soon they're going to move to Alliance. It's an incentive-based program. We have a number of employees who have come on board and said, listen, if you graduate them, I guarantee them a job. And that has been a wonderful experience. In fact, we have a company, Diamonds International, who not only have they guaranteed graduates of the NTA a job, they are now taking this program to their other countries around the world. So we have a number of Bahamians who graduate from the NTA and now working in Africa and in Europe and in South America, all because of what we are doing with the NTA. It's an exciting program.
So there's a chance for adventure and to really broaden your horizons.
NTA is a wonderful opportunity, and like the Minister says, City and Guilds is an internationally known standard organization. It's based in the United Kingdom, and they have very, very high standards. And we are very pleased with the program. We didn't need to expand it. We need more. We need more young people to come in and to be trained. We need more businesses to come on board.
So when you say you need more people to come in, are you not getting the kind of numbers that you hope?
Oh well, I think initially there was a large amount of people interested, but I think they thought that when they come to NTA they would be paid. No, they would be paid. Now we have, I think...
So they're looking for that immediate...
Exactly. I think we need to train them, we need to prepare them for the job market.
Right.
The job will come eventually because with the number of businesses both in New Providence and Grand Bahama and the Family Islands who come on as partners. They have the shipyard. We have a number of chemical companies in Grand Bahama. We have a number of automobile companies, NASA motor companies. They said, listen, if you train these people, we will hire them. And they go to them as interns. When you finish the first program and the second program, then you go with them as an intern. So you work for a couple of weeks, get an understanding of what the labor market is, and then they are guaranteed to have a job. It's a wonderful experience.
If I'm a, say, 18, 19-year-old young man and I go to the NTA, how long do I have to go through that training process before it's likely that I get a job? Through the process you're talking about?
I don't want to guess, but I think it's probably to be guaranteed a job, a successful completion is about 4 months, I think.
Which is really not that bad.
And that 4 months period is two segments. You be trained in the soft skills, then you go on an intern to be trained how to work in the respective establishments, and then you have an unemployment.
It's intensive all day. Kind of thing?
Yes, it's designed. It's a week. The first segment is an intensive program, and then obviously when you go into the internship program, it depends on the employer needs for you. And then we monitor the program too. For instance, our assistant director of labor in Eleuthera is also the NTA coordinator for Island of Eleuthera. So when interns graduate from the NTA program, they are placed in businesses in Eleuthera. One of her job is to go to the business and make sure that the students are being trained and properly serviced. So when it's time for them to be employed, they have the necessary skills both on the academic side as well as on the job side.
But I guess the thing is too that if you don't have a job and you don't get into the NTA, 4 months later, at least you'll have a job from
Exactly.
the NTA. You might still be looking for a job
Exactly.
for 4 months if you didn't do it.
Exactly.
So it makes a lot of sense to do it. Now, green jobs, right? Green jobs is a big thing. It's a new, well, it's not that new, but it's becoming more in demand, and there's more interest in it. I know someone who actually has an interest in environmental matters and the green economy. I'm seeing so many younger Bahamians that are working full-time jobs and making good money. But that was a major plank of your agenda.
Certainly was.
Right, and let's listen to the Director General of the ILO, Guy Ryder, speaking about the green economy.
We have to face up to the global challenge in the next months of moving our global economy onto a sustainable future, a carbon low, ecologically sustainable future. And I know in Bahamas some very exciting things are happening around that. You know, I used to work for an organisation, I came out of the labour movement, where we always felt, this is up till about 15 years ago, we felt you had to choose between jobs, protecting and promoting jobs of our people, or protecting the planet. We thought there was a choice to be made, but you couldn't do both. But actually you can. I think the realisation has dawned upon us that if you don't do the one, you don't do the other. The slogan which says it so well now is, there are no jobs on the dead planet, and there are no jobs on the dead planet. That's true. And I think what Bahamas is doing and looking at in the protection of its marine environment, the Andros project, there's a lot of jobs in going green, a lot of jobs, but it won't happen automatically.
No, obviously, that's the question. But do you think we're on the right track?
Well, you know I do. There's a big rendezvous coming up. I don't know if your citizens here have really sort of clicked into this, but at the end of this year, there is an international conference in Paris, France, which is a key conference on climate change. We have the opportunity in December to fix targets for the global economy, with all nation states playing the game, to keep carbon emissions down so that the rise in temperatures will be no more than 2% Celsius. It's coming.
Like he said, the Bahamas is the ideal place to be working for green and blue jobs. Ideal place. All we are, you know.
I mean, when we think about it, Julian, this need to reduce the cost of electricity for businesses and the tourism sector is so important. That means green jobs are going to be so important. We're talking about the jobs involved in waste to energy production that is fast growing. The job to transform solar power to electricity. The jobs to transfer wind power and sea power. The Bahamas is an ideal spot for that. What does that mean? That means we have international companies coming to the Bahamas to implement these various forms of technology. Bahamians have to position themselves to be able to have these jobs and be able to sustain these jobs. Sustainable development is what it's all about. Talk about our theme parks. So talk about the fact that the Bahamas, as far as the region, has one of the largest amount of theme parks, preserves, our wildlife, our sea reserves. Those are green jobs. When we talk about the fact that the large hotel properties now, the Atlantis and the Bahama, they have now moved to a technology where they use seawater coming from 3,000 feet below to cool the air conditioning systems. That means you don't need the power generator, the water comes cool.
Exactly.
And so those are jobs that humans need to fill. They have to qualify themselves to fill these jobs.
Yeah, and you know, I'm sure he said it in that clip too, he was referring to BAMC in particular, on the importance of BAMC as far as the future is concerned. But anyway, we've got to take a little break right now. We're speaking with Labour Director Robert Farquharson. We'll be back with more on the Reid Factor. Well, one of the big things that happened during the ILO Caribbean Ministers Conference was the fact that the National Tripartite Council bill that we passed in Parliament earlier was signed by the Governor General And there was a special ceremony that the Director General of the ILO was able to attend. And I know that they were ecstatic. They were over the moon that we were able to do that. We got a soundbite first that has the Labor Minister, Shane Gibson, and also the Regional Director of the ILO, Giovanni Di Cola, talking about that.
With social dialogue being legislated, it means now that no matter which government is in office, no matter which personality is in office, that you would always have the ability as one of the social partners to have an input to any issue that's important to you. And it's not narrowed down to only labor matters. If there are any matters that the social partners want to discuss and recommend to the government, they have the ability to do that through the Tripartite Council, and we don't get to select them. They get to select who they want to represent them as the social partners. So that is very significant.
Somebody may say, yes, but what is the consistency of what is the importance of such a bill? And I want to tell you it's so important because you go for something that it is well established, is transparent, is coordinated. There is no problem about asymmetric information. Everyone knows what this Tripartite Council is going to do. And number 4, they have an agenda already. So without that Tripartite Council, you cannot carry out an agenda of labor where you have many components going up and down and sometimes crossing each other. You need to have them close, you need to dialogue with them, and you need to get that agenda forward. I'm most grateful that it could happen before the arrival, before the DG of the ILO, because for the organization itself, we were involved. We were requested to provide comments because this is part of our job. And we provided the comments. Of course, those comments are free of charge, objective comments, peer reviewer throughout the world. And it is to the Bahamians only to decide what they want to do with the comments.
Great. Well, I know as a former union leader what you got to say about that. But I wonder if the average Bahamian still appreciates what this is.
People don't understand that the government of the Bahamas ratified ILO Convention 144 in 1979.
Wow.
That mandated the government to put this legislation in place within 6 years.
And it took us that long to do it? From 1970?
2015, it was signed.
Oh.
What happened was, it was a policy. Successive governments brought tripartite discussions to a policy matter. That means, depending on who in power, they change the policy, it changes. Who is appointed depends on who's in power. What this government has done is they enshrined it in legislation. So it doesn't matter who comes afterwards.
You can't change
the
it.
Government of the Bahamas is mandated by law to listen to the National Tripartite Council. On that council has the worker represented by trade union movement, the employers represented by the Employer Confederation, and the government of the Bahamas. This also augurs well for industrial harmony in the Bahamas, Glenn.
That's what I was going to say. So
Listen,
we should
so
expect to see
expect
fewer...
If you have a problem in the movement, take it to the council, we discuss it, the employers, the government resolve the matter. That's the idea behind it. If we have a smooth industrial relations climate, that means our economy will be much better. And then the second part, the government needs advice on many matters. All of the wisdom is not resident in those men and women in Parliament.
Well, we know that.
They are now mandated, they are now statutory mandate before any legislation comes to Parliament to get the views of the National Tripartite Council that impacts the world of work. And the minister says it's not industrial relations, any matter in the Bahamas.
Wow. Wow. So
that's a powerful thing.
That is really a powerful
certainly,
thing
Julian,
for us.
It's a remarkable achievement. I'm so proud that I was involved from the beginning stages, and now we see it come to fruition. I'm so happy that the Director General, the first time he was in the Bahamas was on this trip, and he was able to witness for the first time that bill coming to power.
Because really, even I'm sure even as a union leader, when you've had to take industrial action,
exactly.
you don't want to do it.
No,
really.
you don't want to do it.
Because what does that cause? It causes time and money, doesn't it?
It draws money. The productivity is reduced, performance efficiency reduced, and the public is impacted. Now that we have the National Tripartite Council enshrined, whenever there's a problem, the trade union leaders are involved. The leaders of the movement are involved. So if they come to us with a problem, we say, okay, let's drop what we do and let's fix this problem because this will have national implications.
Oh, it's a very important thing. Very important thing. So that brings us to the relationship with the ILO and CARICOM. And more specifically, of course, the relationship between ILO and the Bahamas. And we've been there from day one, really, pretty much.
Most definitely, most definitely. The International Labour Organization is critically important to the Bahamas. Like Minister Gibson says, when the bill first came to Parliament, it was widely circulated. We had some initial views. The minister said, Mr. Director, what is the ILO saying about this? So we put the bill on hold. sent to Dr. DeCola in Geneva, he sent to Switzerland, we got the IMPOC, and we had the initial bill had some errors in it. And as a result of those errors, the ILO was able to point out the errors, tell us what's happening in the region, what's happening in North America, what's happening in Africa, and we were able to redraft the entire bill and craft it in such a way that it went through Parliament, approved unanimously.
Yeah, which is really
100% of the parliamentarians.
We don't hear about that
supported it.
happening
You don't hear
all
that
the
very
time.
much no
Yeah,
more.
that's
And then what as a result of it? That means now that every matter, every bill that comes to the Bahamas that will impact the Bahamian workers, the National Tripartite Council is mandated to have a discussion of the opinion and provide advice to the government of the Bahamas on any matter, and that's a wonderful thing. The Decent Country program that was approved in 2009, Clint. One of the first things we're going to do is we're going to review that. Let's make sure we up to par. Let's make sure this thing about green jobs are involved, about sustainable development is involved. These are some of the things that were not so focused in 2009. Maybe we need to amend the Decent Work program to make sure that the Bahamian workforce consider these things whenever it comes to the world of work in the Bahamas.
What else do you see that came out of this meeting that we have to work a little harder at achieving?
For instance, one of the discussions that came up in the meeting with the Ministers of Labor is the need to have social security issues. The social services, are we on par with the region? The issue of minimum wage. Is the minimum wage in the Bahamas and around the region able to sustain the poor people? Those are some of the discussions. Productivity in the workplace. Is the Bahamian workforce productivity? Does the trade union movement have a greater role to play in ensuring that the members who they represent are trained for the workforce? They have a role today in our partner in the social dialogue concept.
Yep,
so why can't they invest some of the monies that they have, some of the dues that they collect from members, to train their members to be more productive in the workplace? Those are some of the discussions that were held during the workshop. We talk about the fact that sustainable development. Why should we focus so much, Clint, on increasing, Julian, let me apologize, Julian, increasing salaries when the level of productivity is not increasing? That's important too.
Yeah, that's true.
Extremely
Why
important.
should you get a raise if you ain't working?
My point exactly.
Yeah, and people always say they want to get a raise, but they're not working. Their attendance is poor.
Poor
They're
attendance.
not producing.
When they come to work, they ain't doing what they're supposed to do.
Exactly.
They're taking long lunch breaks. I'm saying that's important. And at a national level, Clint.
Julian again.
Oh man, please
That's
forgive
all right,
me.
no problem. But let me ask you this. Do you think that we have to evolve to a place where when you're just not doing those things that it's easier to terminate you? Like there is in the private sector. I mean, they have it a little bit too easy, maybe. But do you think that when people realize that you could really be fired for not working the way you should, that maybe they'll start working the way that they should?
I think the leaders of the trade union movement have to take more responsibility in bringing their membership up to par on the importance of productivity and be straight up with them. When you do not produce, here is what could happen to you. When you come to work, when you want to feel like coming to work, when you leave, when you want to leave, and you don't do what you're being paid to do, there should be some consequences. The movement, the employers and the government needs to get together in a tripartite forum and say, okay, maybe this person needs some training. Maybe this person, give them an opportunity to be trained, and if they continue, then the chips have to fall where they may. And we have too much young men, young women out there looking for a job, need a job to sustain their family, and we have a lot of people in the workplace. In the Department of Labor, we have people who come to the Department of Labor, file trade disputes for being wrongfully dismissed. And listen, man, if you steal from an employer has the right to dismiss your services.
You're gone.
You shouldn't have to come to the Department of Labor asking for pay because you were stolen and you want the man to pay you for firing you.
But how do you respond to a situation like that? If someone has been stolen, I mean, why should they have any recourse?
Yeah, and in the law they don't. They don't have any recourse under the law.
All right, so
but because of the lack of knowledge, the lack of education, they still come thinking they have certain rights.
So how do you deal with people like that? You say, hey,
straight up,
Paula, I can't help you.
Straight up. You have to tell them the facts. Straight up. I help you try find another job. That's my role in the Department of Labor, but you need to know If you have a fundamental breach of your employment contract, the employer has the right to dismiss you summarily without pay.
But if you
and
get
without
fired
notice.
for stealing, it's going to make it very difficult because they're going to want to know why you...
Exactly.
Right?
How do you get a good, hey, reference? You know?
Just can't happen. Just can't happen. But you talked about minimum wage as well. Now, we know that the government has just announced that we've had an increase in the minimum wage. But now that's for the public sector, right?
For the public sector.
I understand that the private sector is stenching.
The National Tripartite Council has, over the past, although the bill recently passed, we have been meeting as a body in preparation for the pass of the bill. And the National Tripartite Council will, in the next 10 days, submit a recommendation supported by the employers for an increase in the national minimum wage. I can tell you that it has been discussed and has been agreed by the council. We are only waiting formally for the passage of the bill, signing by the Governor General, and we expect the Governor of the Bahamas to get a recommendation from us on increasing the national minimum wage. At present, it stands at $150 per week, or $30 per day, or $4 per hour. And we expect that to be approved by the Cabinet of the Bahamas.
We have to go to break, but before we do that, how do we compare? Actually, no, we'll take a break and we'll come back and talk a little bit more about the minimum wage and before we do the other aspects to wrap up. That's great. This is a good conversation. Before the break, we're speaking with Labor Director Robert Foxson, and we were speaking about the minimum wage we were talking about. And you were talking about the move towards a national wage. First of all, comparing minimum wage per capita, and you know, I guess compared to each economy, it's different. But how do we compare to the other places in the region as far as our minimum wage?
During the course of the recent conference, I was a bit shocked. I mean, we did some research regionally, but that's the first time we had 22 Caribbean countries come together. Some countries don't have a minimum wage. Some countries in the Caribbean, believe it or not, don't have established trade unions by law. So as far as the Bahamas is, we are far above the rights of workers, protecting the rights of workers. In some countries, they have sectoral minimum wages. For instance, they have a minimum wage for people who work in shops, minimum wage for people who work in the hotel sector. There are about three or four countries who have a national minimum wage. The Bahamas is above all of those when it comes to the national minimum wage of $150 per week. Some countries are in the
What about buying power? Because there are some countries whose dollars may not be at value as ours, but they may have more buying power for what their dollar or their currency is.
Out of all the 22 nations in the Caribbean, the Bahamas has the strongest dollar, believe it or not. A country like Trinidad, which has oil, which has a number of natural resources, their dollar is pegged to US dollars 6 to 1.
Right, but what is the buying power of it,
buying
even though
power,
it's stronger,
right,
isn't it?
Stronger buying power, because obviously the cost of fuel is significantly less in those countries. And so the cost of goods and services are less. So notwithstanding the fact that they have our dollar is stronger than theirs as per the US dollar, the buying power is a bit more because of these various different factors.
Now, when we talk about the private sector not quite getting to the minimum wage yet, because one would think ordinarily that, you know, hey, the private sector pays more than government, but it's what, the sort of smaller businesses that are private that have the issues.
And the concerns raised by the Bahamas Employers, Chamber of Commerce Employers Confederation was that yes, any significant increase in the minimum wage will have really far-reaching impact on the small and medium-sized businesses, those mom and pop stores, those small businesses that are so important in sustaining the economy. That's where the majority of the employment opportunities are. So we have to be extremely careful on what we raise the minimum wages to make sure that those businesses operating expenses do not escalate to the point where they begin to have to lay people off or close their businesses. And so that is the balance that we have to reach. We look at the Department of Statistics and the cost of living, how much the cost of living has increased since 2001 when the minimum wage was established. We look at what the buying power of the $1 was back then to what it is now. We also did some research at a regional level from Canada in the north, Argentina and south. What has happened in those countries when minimum wage was increased? And the cry from employers was that jobs are lost. That's not the facts. When we look at the facts, employment increases because the people who are impacted by minimum wage, when they get an increase, they spend that money right back in the community. They don't take that money and save and put it in a bank or put it in an RA or pension fund. When that minimum wage is increased, they then turn around, take that same money that they are earning and go to these small businesses, these medium-sized businesses, and they buy food for their children, and thus the economy grows and employment grows.
I bet you some of the private employers are saying too, oh, VAT in now, so I can't do it. Which is not even an accurate or an acceptable excuse because they don't pay the VAT. It's the consumer who pays the VAT.
Exactly.
Right? So I tell you. But as we talk about moving toward the future, we all internationally, it's known as the post-2015 agenda, right? Because 2015 was a major target point for things like the United Nations Millennium Development Goals, etc. And I discussed the MDGs and the future for the ILO, of course, as well, with Guy Ryder, the Director General of the ILO. Let's listen to that.
These Millennium Development Goals that were set by the United Nations way back at the beginning of the millennium, as their name suggests, as you say, there's 8 of them. Some we've got there. The halving poverty, we've done it, really surprisingly. I think we have to be honest with ourselves. Most of that was due to the outstanding performance of a limited number of countries, particularly China. If you took China out of the equation, the scoreboard looks a little less satisfactory. But okay. But I think that the great merit of the Millennium Development Goals is it captured public imagination. You could go around, talk to NGOs, talk to citizens, and say, hey, we've got these goals. We want to halve poverty. We want to save mothers from dying in childbirth. We want to make sure all children have clean water. This grabbed the attention. In a way, it's very difficult to get people to take any interest in these types of things. So it's been a success story, but the MDGs expire this year now, so we have to set the new agenda. And in September, the UN is about to do that. It's a complicated story, believe me.
He started off talking about eradicating poverty, which is one of the major things. And we know that we've got a higher level of poverty here than we want. But the interesting thing he said to me was that even though it seems like we've beaten it, it's only because China. Yeah. What's been happening in China? All right?
Exactly. It's remarkable how China so far away, the impact what's happening in China affects us right here in the Bahamas.
The entire world.
The entire world. It is, and he also spoke about sustainable development. The new goals, the post-2015 agenda has to include having jobs, sustainable development, having focusing on employment for young people, having those who are unemployed, having the proper social protection levels in place. And all of these things are so important because, believe it or not, when we look at the amount of young people unemployed around the world, it is remarkable. I think those numbers are like 66 million young people unemployed around the world.
But you got another problem too, right? People are living longer and are 75 now doesn't mean that you in a wheelchair. It means you could work. Your brain is working. You can work hard. Actually, so much so in France, I believe they raised the retirement age. Can you see that happening here? Because we have a lot of people over 70.
We have to consider it. We have to consider the Bahamas. Right now, you retire. Some people at age 60, some people at 65. People are young when they're 65.
Exactly.
Would it be prudent to have people retire at age 70? What does that mean? That means they will work a bit longer. They will contribute more to national insurance. They will take the time when they begin to take from national insurance will be extended, so national insurance fund will be able to build. All of these things have to be considered in 2015 and beyond. That's why it's so important for these meetings, like the meeting we held in New Providence, like the meeting that's going to be held in Geneva for the Bahamas, to play an integral part in these discussions. Because we, believe it or not, the world is nothing but a village now. And we cannot live in isolation from what's happening around the world. So, and labor, believe it or not, has so much impact on everything that we do. I mean, tell me about it, if we don't have the proper rules and regulations in place for labor and non-Bahamians to come in this country and work, that would be less work for Bahamians. So the Department of Labor, the Ministry of Labor and National Insurance has to play a critical role along with the Department of Immigration. Who comes into the Bahamas to work, when they come into the Bahamas to work, and how long they come into the Bahamas to work for.
Another big deal with respect to the MDGs too is gender equality. We know that's the issue here too. But let's get more specific to the issue of women getting equal pay. I haven't seen any statistics on that. What are the statistics? Do we have statistics? What do we know? Do women get paid the same as men, or do they get paid less?
The Department of Statistics Labor Force Survey, it's very close. It's not equal, but it's very close. Unlike the United States of America, I think a woman is 70 cents for every dollar.
Right.
We're not that far apart. Although it's not equal at this point, we have to move it to be equal. I think it's about close to about 88, 89%, if my memory serves me correctly. There's still some, not only equal pay, but equal benefits, equal rights. Our promotions are similar as men compared to women. The amount of executives in corporate Bahamas, is it the same thing compared to men and women? All of these things here comes into play. And that's something what the ILO has tremendous focus on, gender equality in the workplace.
Okay. Now, Dr. Giovanni Di Cola, who you know, I'm sure very well, is leaving. Well, he says he's not leaving. He's just, he's been given a wonderful new job. Actually, going to be working with the multinationals, multilaterals, back in Geneva. But he's been in Trinidad for the past 5 years, and from everything I've had in my discussions with him, he definitely considers himself to be part of the Caribbean family. Now, I was asking him about what lessons the developed world could learn from the Caribbean, and what the route forward is for the Caribbean, the way forward. And he was saying basically that we need not to be intimidated, but to keep on the right track. Let's hear from Dr. Di Cola.
You shouldn't be daunted by the challenges. You are very resilient. You know what you are going to do in the future. Just make sure that your voice is heard, and don't be be daunted by others that are not as optimistic as we are when we talk with the Caribbean in these gatherings.
So don't be daunted.
Don't be daunted, and that's why these meetings are so important. When we go to Geneva, the 22 countries of the Caribbean stand with one voice, with one bloc. And regardless of how much countries are around, we use the work we do here in the region as an example to the rest of the world. And that's so important. This Tripartite Council, believe it or not, it's not that much practice in the world. The Caribbean is a leader because we have strong trade union movements, and we have strong democratic system in the region. And so the world, we are not intimidated by the world. When we go to these international meetings, we stand firm as one.
Now, you're a labor director.
Yes.
What would you like to see accomplished within the next year, and then in the next 5 years, if you're still in that capacity?
Okay, well, I'd like to see the minimum wage increased. I'd like to see the issue of redundancy tackled. Employers in this country are getting away with murder and making behemoths redundant and paying little or no cost. And I would like to see the concept of productivity increase significantly, workplace productivity. And finally, I'd like to see the trade union movement take a more active role in training their members in customer service and customer appreciation and productivity and efficiency. Because if we as a people could get the worker representative, the trade union leaders to say to the workers, come to work on time, do what you're being paid to do, be productive and efficient in the workplace, it only augurs well for our economy.
And knowing you're going to move on it aggressively. Robert Farquharson, thank you for being on the Reid Factor.